You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys. My name is David. This is a podcast where we discuss horror, science fiction, movies, television, movies that made an impression on us and hopefully made an impression on you. And then we kind of come up with the key elements of those that have influenced other things. Like I said, my name is David. I'm here with my good friend Tim. Hey, Tim.
Hey, David. I'm doing well. I was just thinking that it's kind of funny that we can see each other now doing video and co-hosting. Yeah, because of that show we did so long ago, Greater Tuna, where we were actually radio disc jockey people. Which is
Yep.
right. And it's like, now I can see your reactions and I can upstage you if I want to.
Right. And I can try to be doing the welcome and you can be going like that and distracting me. Sure, great. Yeah.
Whoops.
No, that's okay. What have you been doing? How you been?
Oh, I've been good. We're actually, as this airs, we are in October.
And Christmas in the air.
Yeah, and it's still warm outside.
But fall leaves are falling and Halloween is coming.
They're burning.
Anyway,
as far as what have I been up to, and I think I talked to you about this briefly off the air. Dennis and I watched the Imagineering series on Disney Plus, which I found fascinating. Especially with the very first episode and the basically, for those of you out there that don't know, it is primarily about the building of the Disney World parks all over the world, or the Disneyland parks all over the world. The first one, Disneyland, was built in the 50s. I was just amazed at how much footage they had. It was like, Disney, I guess, because they were their own film production company, decided to just film the making of that park.
Yeah.
And I mean, they were showing things like the lagoon for 20,000 Leagues with no water in it, and just all this fascinating stuff that I had no idea existed. So if you are a theme park person or a Disney person or both, I would highly recommend it. It goes into beyond Disney World, which was built in the late 60s, early 70s, all the way through, I guess Shanghai was the last park that opened.
Shanghai was the last. It took I think 10, 12 years of negotiation to get Shanghai even started.
Right.
And
you are a part of that as well. You were part of the Disney Sea.
Correct. Tokyo Disney Sea, which is still my favorite park that they've ever done.
And that's just Japan, right?
Okay. Yeah, basically Tokyo Disneyland, which is extremely popular, and it was probably my favorite park before Tokyo Disney Sea was made. The same people that partnered with Disney on it wanted to do a second gate or a second park. And so that's when all the development for Tokyo Disney Sea happened. And the reason it's called Tokyo Disney Sea is because it's based on the 7 oceans of the world. That's what all the lands are, instead of Frontierland and Adventureland. And now they've got Cars Land or whatever. It was all about the oceans.
Right.
So it was really cool.
Right. I think they only have Cars Land in California Adventure. But I would imagine it may come to Hollywood Studios in Florida eventually.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I admit, Cars Land was well developed. The rides are good. The whole theming is really good.
The guy that developed that, did you know him? He seemed pretty interesting.
Oh, you're talking about
the Imagineer.
Yeah,
I can't remember who it was.
A lot of them, I worked with, and when I was watching that series, I would go, "Oh, I remember you," or "da da da," or "Yeah," So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I had heard that it was worth getting Disney Plus just to see that series, and
Yeah.
Dennis and I devoured it in
Yeah.
2 or 3 nights. So
I would agree. It's
yeah.
really well done. It's really good, and it talks about the bleak times too.
Oh yeah,
Imagineers
they don't
had.
cover anything up. They talk about the mistakes as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like California Adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
doing parks on the cheap. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
That was another reason why I like Tokyo Disney Sea, and the reason I think it's designed the way it is because that one's one they spared no expense. They actually way overspent, but that was okay. They wanted what they wanted. So,
Right.
Yeah, I haven't been doing anything exciting like that. The only thing I did was I watched Age of Ultron again just because it was on, and I like it.
I did that about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like that one. It's again Joss Whedon. It's good. I like the characters. I like the development of the characters. Marvel's just done a brilliant job with this entire, Infinity Stones arc or whatever. So.
Yeah, it's probably my least favorite Avengers movie, which is sad because it's one of my favorite Avengers stories. Vision is one of my favorite characters, and Ultron was one of my favorite enemies. And I don't know. It was okay. I think it's a good movie. It's just my least favorite of all of them.
Well, yeah, I think of all the Marvels, my favorite still is probably Winter Soldier. I think just because I love the Captain America arc in it. It's just really good. It's got the great elevator fight in it, and it's got that great chase with Nick Fury in the car and everything. So yeah, I think it's probably my favorite overall movie of all of them. Well, until you come up to the last two, which are essentially a 6-hour epic.
Right. Yeah, I like Ragnarok a lot.
Ragnarok's funny.
I liked Doctor Strange. I thought it was a good movie.
Doctor Strange is good. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm not a big Thor fan, but I did like Ragnarok.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm not a big Thor fan either. I couldn't read the comic books. I got tired of the ye's and these and stuff. It was stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need American dialect, not Norse.
Not Norse. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So.
Well, what are we talking about this week? Now that we're through with the pleasantries, let's just take a big bite out of this.
Dive right in.
Yeah.
Well, since we are in October now, or I guess we will be in October.
Yes.
Who knows when we will be airing this? I thought we would turn into I guess this is the first of a vampire movie we're diving into this season. Yes, it is. And it would be 1994's Interview with a Vampire. It is based on the very popular 1976 novel by Anne Rice. And it has spawned 11 sequels in novels, not in movies, as well as another series called New Adventures of the Vampires or something. I can't remember what she called that.
Really?
Yeah, she brought them back for a while.
After the witches or whatever? Or
yes,
zombies
after
or
the
mummies
witches. Yeah, the mummy, the mummy had his own book, and then her son co-authored one with her recently that was a sequel, which I haven't read. And the Mayfair Witches came around the 90s.
Now, is she still living in New Orleans?
No, she left New Orleans for a long while back and lives in La Jolla now, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And I used to follow her on Facebook. She was always posting, especially political stuff. And now I never see her stuff anymore. So I was just questioning that this morning in the shower. I was like, I haven't seen her on Facebook in a long time. But we'll get into it more when we get to the keys. But, she just signed a huge development deal with AMC for both those projects. The Vampire series and the Mayfair Witches now are owned by the same people that are doing Walking Dead. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
No, I don't know. Well, we'll see. Yeah.
So anyway, a little bit about the plot of this particular book. A lot of the books following this centered more on the vampire Lestat, And I'll say Lestat. I always say Lestat, but in the movie they say Lestat, so it's a little confusing. So if I go back and forth, there you go. This book centers more on the character of Louis de Pontdelac, however you pronounce that. And he is a plantation owner in the 1790s that is grieving the loss of his wife and child, who she died in childbirth. And he is drunk and careless and doesn't want to live anymore. And he is noticed by a vampire named Lestat that decides just to offer him the gift of being a vampire to see if he might enjoy that more than, grieving the death of his wife. He does that. But then he immediately regrets it, and he becomes like the most remorseful vampire in history. And Lestat senses this and tries to entice him into staying with him by turning a little girl into a vampire that becomes essentially their daughter, Claudia. And a lot of the themes of this movie, I'm trying not to mix the book and the movie because there is a little bit of a difference, are Louis's quest to find why vampires exist, and he doesn't get what he thinks are straight answers from Lestat, who he thinks is just a vicious killer, and it's questioning his own existence basically. And then midway through the movie, when Lestat is out of the picture, they go to Paris, or actually they go all over Europe and end up in Paris to determine the answers for why they exist. So
yeah, it is a very quest for my creator sort of story, but layered with, of course, Louis' Catholic guilt or whatever.
A lot.
Yeah. True.
The book has more of that than the movie, actually.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
So this movie is ripe with controversy, or at least it was when it was being made. What are your initial thoughts of the movie and its history? And I'm talking the movie, not the novel.
Well, just brief about the novel before I jump to the movie.
Sure.
I had read the novel when it first came out and really liked it. I really like Anne Rice. I was not a big fan of Lestat, but I did like I kind of, I was one of those that was a Louisite. I kind of agreed with the whole I don't want to kill, and I could see how that became, Angel and Buffy kind of attitude, that whole guilt over murder, if sort of thing, living off another human, kind of issue. And I liked the framing device of the interviewer, and I liked the way that was done.
And that's right out of the book.
And then we got to the movie, and although I liked sections of the movie, and overall I think her screenplay is very strong, I struggle with the movie because I think it slows down a lot in the last act and needs something else. And you need to kind of get over the brooding of Louis there a bit. But it has brilliant casting in Kirsten Dunst, and I don't like the rest of the cast.
Right.
Really.
It's a terribly miscast movie.
It is very miscast. I was curious what you would think since you're such a Tom Cruise fan.
No, fuck Tom
Cruise.
I
was curious what you would think about this movie.
Yeah, Tom Cruise, who's just grasping at accents in this movie. At one time,
oh my God,
when he starts shouting at Louis, he sounds like he's from the Bronx. I was like, what? What is that accent you're doing? No French accent really ever, unless he's saying a French word like mon cher.
Right.
God, I could talk about this movie forever. There's a lot going on here. I agree with Kirsten Dunst. I think she was amazing in this movie, and she deserved the Golden Globe nomination that she got. However, in the book, the little girl is only 5. In this,
Yeah.
she's like 12. I think she was playing 10, but she was actually 12 when cast. And
But
I think
it works better because it also, to me, adds a little bit of that kind of, Anne Rice loves the homoeroticism. She likes the ambiguous love sort of stuff. And this added that whole other layer of, is it really daddy daughter or what? I don't know.
right,
So
right. Well, and if you
which
read
she
Anne
couldn't really
Rice,
approach as much as she did in the novel, in the movie, I don't think.
no, they toned it down. And you
Right.
mentioned the screenplay, which was credited to her, but it was heavily rewritten by Neil Jordan because I don't think she knows how to write screenplays. And he somehow in the negotiations, she still ended up with credit, but she didn't write that screenplay.
But that may be in plotting because a lot of that dialogue is the book. And
Right.
is very poetic and is very romance, novel-y, vampire. I mean, good vampire writing.
It's lush. It's very
Yeah.
lush. Yeah.
And I don't think that's Neil Jordan. I think so. She may have written a version. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I've got to fix this." And I had done in research. I read that he did add a lot more of the angstiness of Catholicism as opposed to angstiness of vampire killing, kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That being said, this movie, even though this movie is horribly miscast, I have seen this movie probably as many times as I have most of my favorite movies. I have seen this movie at least 20 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you have the DVD, so obviously.
Well, I do.
You have the Blu-ray.
But I mean, no, I went and saw this 5 times in a theater. It was the last movie I saw multiple times in a theater.
And that's just because you wanted to see Tom Cruise? Why was that?
No, it's just because I'm so in love with the story and the mythos. I don't like Tom Cruise. I do like Brad Pitt, but I think he should have either not been in it or been cast as someone else. I think Antonio Banderas is fantastic in it, but he's playing a character that in the book is a 17-year-old Russian redhead, and he looks like Lily Munster. I'm like, What is going on here?
I think it would have been interesting to see him attempt Lestat. Even though Lestat is younger and everything, I think it would have been interesting to see what he would have done with that because there's such a mystery to him anyway. And that might have worked to me for Lestat.
He's got some of my favorite lines. I love when he says...
Armand's got some great stuff.
Yeah, and then I came to save you from the terrible dawn.
Yes. Well, I like his first entrance is phenomenal, and even the way he hands him the card and everything, and then goes, "And remember my name," and walks away, and you go, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah, he's fantastic. So anyway, I guess what I was trying to say is, even though I have issues with the casting, I still love the film. There's something about this movie that speaks to me on multiple levels. One is knowing the mythos and having read the books multiple times. 2 is the screenplay structure. I like the screenplay. I think it's broken down and works really well as a film. But then on a grand level, and this is a key for me, is it's like the Gone with the Wind of vampire movies. It's epic, it's beautiful, it's lush, and it's got iconic characters in it. And I'm like, this movie, and he set out to make a Gone with the Wind type movie. Geffen did, not Jordan, but David Geffen. He pumped $70 million into this movie, and you don't see vampire movies being made for that kind of money.
No.
So that's, I guess,
I agree
one of the
with
reasons.
you. I mean, zombies are yours, vampires have always been mine. I think vampires are one of the most iconic mythic monsters ever. I love the fact that they can be horrific and romanticized essentially all at the same time. There is an attraction to the darkness, literally, that they represent in different ways. And I think she's Anne Rice is very adept at exploring that in different ways, even the way she expanded into the series and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so much so, I mean, the biggest key for me is it's hugely, heavily influenced, me when Joe and I wrote Nosferatu for the stage, and used a lot of the conceits that she did, which is one of the questions I have for you based on vampire literature. Isn't this the first literature that kind of does away with a lot of the myths? It kind of says crucifixes, nah, stakes, who cares? Sunlight, yes. Coffins, yes, just because they're kind of a necessary thing. And blood, yes.
Right.
But some of that old mythos made up, didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the first. I want to say that I Am Legend may have done away with crucifixes too.
Okay.
But it did not do away with garlic, because he used to hang garlic on his windows.
Okay.
But then again, I have not read a lot of vampire literature. I have read the main ones, those two that I just mentioned, and I've read Anne Rice multiple times because I think she's just a really, I don't know, she's just a great writer to me. What's weird is she's great and she's bad. I mean, some of her books are phenomenal and some of them are real turkeys, and I won't go into that here. So yeah, it does do away with some of the legends. Another one of my favorite lines, we were talking about lines a while ago, is when Louis says, I'm quite fond of crucifixes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, quite fond of them.
I'm quite fond of them. So yeah, but she sticks to the basics. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a coffin. That goes away later in the books too, as long as they're underground or in the dark somewhere.
Right.
Not necessarily in a coffin. As you saw in that one scene when Louis burns down his plantation, they end up spending the night in a crypt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So casting wise, was this like Jordan's whole deal with cast? I mean, was that his? I mean, because I noticed it had 3 different people who cast it. I was going, really? You needed that many people to mess up this bad?
Well, I can talk about casting because there's several crazy things that happened during the midst of that. But let me talk just a little bit about Neil Jordan. We've talked about Anne Rice.
Yeah.
Neil Jordan was coming off of The Crying Game, which was an Oscar-nominated movie.
Huge.
Yeah, and they snagged him. And honestly, I haven't seen many movies he's directed since this. I love this movie. He had done The Company of Wolves, which was an artsy werewolf movie back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But he's also since done another vampire movie that's got good buzz called Byzantium. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Yeah.
But I noticed looking at just his creds coming out of this movie, he goes into all of this very stylized. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, that title, because looking at the titles of his movies, they seem to be this very stylized Italian European influenced sort of mid 18th century story.
Well, he did Mona Lisa before The Crying Game, which speaks Italy. But he also did Michael Collins, which is like Ireland, isn't it? Or Scotland.
That's Ireland. Yeah.
So, however, before he came to be the helm of this, the directing influence of this movie, in 1978, apparently John Boorman was attached to it with John Voight was going to be Lestat.
Oh, no. But okay, John Boorman I could see, yeah, but not.
Yeah.
No,
so I thought that was interesting. I had not read that anywhere until we were prepping for this episode, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And before we move on to casting, well, I just have actually a lot of background and stuff too.
Sure.
Well, I feel like 2 of the other cast members that are not really cast members that make this movie the epic that I love are Elliot Goldenthal, who did the music. I love the music in this movie.
Yes.
It is fantastic.
Incredibly good.
And then Stan Winston did the effects, and he was just coming off of Jurassic Park and wanted to do something small because he thought he was going to get stereotyped as a dinosaur maker. So he said, let me
puppet
do
guy.
these vampires. And they were like, Jordan said he was shocked to hear from Stan Winston saying, I would like to do this film.
Mm-hmm.
And the vampires look great. I like
Well,
the
and
fangs.
I'll add to. I liked the way he did the fangs with the double.
Yeah.
The double fangs was a great idea.
And they're subtle. They never go away. You can
Right.
see them.
The veining was a good idea, although they are somewhat so pasty, and especially when they've got the contacts in. I was going, okay, they could never. I mean, if I saw that dude at a party, I'm going to go,
out.
You're a freaking vampire, dude. I'm not going to go with you out to have a drink or anything, because it's not. There's nothing subtle about their look when they are vamped. So to speak. But then again, that was kind of a Buffy staple too. Another key, when they would go into vamp face, and they looked actually demonic kind of thing. But the two that I would add to your production, well, three really, I'd add David Geffen, because I've always liked Geffen. I liked everything he's done. I mean, and he actually has a key for us because he did Little Shop of Horrors, the movie.
Yeah, he did.
But I would add, in addition to Winston, I would add Dante Ferretti, who did all the production design. And he's incredible. I loved the production design, the way he did the apartments, the way he did the theater.
When you see the waterfront, I mean, it's as beautiful as a shot in Gone with the Wind. I'm like, look at that,
And the plantation and New Orleans before then. I mean, just all this, his production design is great. And of course, Sandy Powell, who I have seen in other stuff too, who's the costume designer. And she almost exclusively does period pieces. Like she did Shakespeare in Love, and she did Charlotte, and she's done a lot of just really, period pieces. And she's so good with different textures and different colors. I love playing Lestat in the blue, which is the way I always pictured Lestat in my head. I mean, when I was reading the novel, was he was in blue and Louis in green, and then Armand. Armand in the red, just the way she gave them each kind of their own palette. And then she used, for Kirsten Dunst,
blue.
No, what was her name? Her name was
Claudia.
But she had all the different colors. Started out in blue, like the little girl, but then she would go green and pink and yellow. So, and with the bonnets, and then not with the bonnets to mature her more. And so I just thought the overall, it is the Gone with the Wind of vampire movies. It really is. I think that's a great way to put it.
And then just a little more background. I mentioned the novel. By 1993, when this movie came out, that novel had already been reprinted 48 times.
Wow.
And that's, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
She wrote the book in 1976. Her original, wow, this is more casting. But you know what? I'll go ahead and say it. She originally thought of Rutger Hauer. When the rights were optioned by Paramount, before the book was published, John Travolta was earmarked to play Lestat.
That'd be a no.
Yeah, that's worse than Tom Cruise. But at the time, there was a glut of films, Dracula, Nosferatu the Vampire, which we may cover later, and Love at First Bite were all out. So they put the project on hiatus. They thought there was too many vampire movies.
Oh, yeah.
Hauer and Travolta became too old, although Hauer did end up playing vampires in a remake of Salem's Lot and in the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Upon learning that Tom Cruise had been cast, Anne Rice was livid, said he could not do the part. It was bizarre and impossible to imagine, and the worst crime since the casting of Bonfire of the Vanities. She has some great quotes. She also compared him to, she said casting Cruise as Lestat is like casting Edward G. Robinson as Rhett Butler. Which really cracked me up.
That was a good one. That's a good one.
A lot of the gay subtext in the novels was toned down for the film, so much so that she at one point changed the screenplay for Louis to be a woman, and they were going to cast Cher. Yeah. But that's because they thought Hollywood was too homophobic. I don't need to mention all that. It says body count 56. I didn't really count. I'm sure a lot of people died in this movie. But anyway.
You count chickens. Chickens and rats. There's
And
a lot
yeah,
of those.
birds. That's funny. I was going to dwell just a moment on the not the homophobia, but the homoeroticness of it's there. It's still in this movie. And obviously David Geffen is a gay man, and it's probably one of the reasons why he was attracted to the film to begin with. But if you read the novels, the vampires don't have sex. Their sex organs don't work anymore. The kill is sex to them. And that's why they're so passionate and it's not interspecies. What is it? Intersexed, I guess you would say. They're passionate for one another, whether they're male or female. It's like it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
In some regards.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, there is a heavy homoerotic theme in these novels.
Yeah, and I think maybe that was Neil Jordan's intent with the casting, is to create, to cast two pretty people.
Right.
As these two. And so if they're attracted to each other, are companions, as they say in the movie. And then Antonio Banderas on top of that.
Right.
Then, of course, there's, the homoerotic tendencies are there, kind of thing. So, and they're there, and I think they're played up well enough. I do not think they're similar to I think they're similar, but not to the extent of the novel, of course.
Well, and what's
but
funny
it is definitely there. I mean, I love the whole scene where Claudia even says, "You want him as much as he wants you. You want him as your new companion," and and all that, when she gets really pissed off at him. And that's basically coming out and saying it without saying it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's neither Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt, I think, had ever played a gay character. And Antonio had already played 2 or 3 because he was in Philadelphia, which I think was out before then. But he also played 2 in like Pedro Almodovar movies in Spain. So, I mean, he had never had a problem with it and just stepped right into it. Whereas I'm sure Pitt and Tom Cruise probably questioned whether or not to do it.
You just led me in a really weird tangent, which is, the character that plays the Spanish actor in Sense8? One he would have made a great Armand, even of that, if we're going with that Spanish kind of.
Yeah, I have a hard time picturing Armand as that anymore, because really he's a teenager in the books and he's got curly red hair. And I'm like, he doesn't look anything like Armand, but I like Antonio Banderas, so I just went with it.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing. The conceit of this movie, if you're watching it, is just let it go. Let the casting details, especially if you've read the book, let any of that go and just go with what they've done.
Yeah, because the language is still there. The visuals are still there. The music passion is still there. Yeah. I guess that's a good way to sum it up. Saying that, I can move on to casting now that I got that background.
Yes, sir.
I mentioned Cher. Angelica Houston was also considered for Louis. I just think that's funny because they had rewritten it as a woman. Apparently, she had originally wanted a French actor. I guess this was in the 70s, named Alain Delon. She originally pictured him as Louis. But of course, Brad ended up being the part. I thought I had more on that, but maybe now. All right, Lestat. Her original 2 choices were Rutger Hauer and Julian Sands. Julian Sands was not popular enough at the time. He had done Room with a View, but not much else. So they wanted higher marquee names, which is where Tom Cruise had to come in. Ironically enough, he had to stand on boxes while he was acting with the other cast members. I did read that because he was
Cruise? Well,
he's
of
much
course.
shorter than the rest of them.
He's wee. Yeah.
Others that were considered were John Malkovich, Peter
I would
Weller.
love to have seen him as Lestat. I think
That's who I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Peter Weller and Alexander Goodenough.
Why would you? Okay.
The part was offered to Jeremy Irons, who turned it down.
Oh, see, how could have even seen Jeremy Irons as Louis? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I could have seen that.
Yeah. He said he didn't want to do something that required too much makeup after coming off House of the Spirits. Well, okay. Everyone remembers that movie.
Sure.
Daniel Day-Lewis was originally given the part of Lestat, but had to drop out weeks before filming. So Cruise eventually got the role after it was turned down by Johnny Depp. All this, get your mind going, you know, because I mean, it's a horribly cast film, but it's really hard to second guess a horribly cast film.
Yeah, or to say who would you have cast instead? Yeah, that's who.
But this one is even funnier. Anne Rice met with Tom Hanks to play the part of Lestat after seeing his performance in Philadelphia, but he turned it down because he was doing Forrest Gump.
Well, good for him, but yeah, I don't
see Tom Hanks as Lestat.
No,
at all.
No, that would be like Harrison Ford as Lestat. But it just wouldn't work.
I told you, when Anne Rice is writing a great book, it's fantastic. And when she's writing a turkey, it's a turkey. And I think her casting is the same way. Because Tom Hanks is not Lestat. I just don't see that.
You know what would have made this movie just perfect is keep Tom Cruise as Lestat, but change out Brad Pitt for Keanu Reeves. And it would have just been the perfect movie for us. We would have, because that would just, never.
You just made my stomach go erp.
Or Patrick Swayze as Lestat. Yeah, let's do that. No. Sorry. I especially because you have to say, okay, the book, but no. Let's go with Geffen and Jordan's version of what they want these characters to be, then who would you cast? So,
I could see Depp. I could see Depp.
I could see Rutger Hauer. I think Rutger Hauer's really got a lot of depth. I mean, especially when you watch something like Lady Hawk, which had come out in the 80s.
Well, if he looked like that then, I mean, he would have been too old, though, I think.
Possibly.
But you see what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
I guess they could have, with computer generation. I mean,
Kiefer Sutherland as Lestat. There you go.
No. So anyway, she also begged Jordan to flip the roles and put Tom Cruise in the Louis part and Brad Pitt in the Lestat part, which I think the only reason she did that was because Brad's naturally a blonde and Tom's naturally a brunette. I swear, I think that was her logic. I don't know.
But I could have seen that better than
maybe
what they did.
Maybe.
Because I've seen, you've seen Pitt play tougher, meaner characters, and he has that arc. Mm-hmm. Whereas Cruise, although he thinks he can, really can't. And he's basically always the good guy. And he would be good moaning and whining and all that.
Yeah.
Because I had read that in research looking into it, that Pitt really didn't like the character of Louis because he doesn't really do anything until the end.
Pitt hated
he basically
this movie.
Stands around and watches Lestat, which is true,
Yeah, before I move on to the next casting, I was going to say that Brad Pitt revealed in 2011 that he hated making this movie, that it was a horrible experience, and he tried to buy his way out of it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I just read that he didn't like it and didn't like being just the fact that they took Louis' character away.
Well, he said they did beef up the Lestat moments for the film because, the book does not center on Lestat. the future books do, but the first book centers on Louis. And he said basically he's just walking around brooding the whole film with not much to do. And he said it was six months of darkness that he doesn't care to remember because, and he hated wearing the contacts and the discomfort of the makeup. And he begged Geffen to let him out. And Geffen said that if he did, it would cost $40 million. So he toughed it out.
All right then.
Yeah. So anyway, so I hate to hear that because I do like Brad Pitt. I think he's a great actor. I feel since I like this movie, I wish he would have had a good time. But anyway, Daniel Malloy, this is an interesting note that you'll remember. Christian Slater was given this role because River Phoenix, who was originally cast, died 4 weeks before filming began. Yeah. Slater donated his entire salary of $250,000 to Phoenix's favorite charity, which I thought was kind of cool.
And I think Phoenix would have been phenomenal in the role. I didn't mind Christian Slater in it, though, although every time I see Christian Slater, it's like, Jack Nicholson's son. So, it's the same thing. But
Pump up the volume.
But I do, that's kind of a sad note that had to happen because of Phoenix.
Before they cast him, they did consider Stephen Dorff, another 90s actor. So.
Yeah, I could see that.
Another character that's very brief that I know you took notice of was that Yvette, the lead slave in Louis' plantation, was Thandie Newton.
Yep.
From Westworld.
From Westworld. Yes.
I mentioned that Kirsten Dunst was she was 12 years old at the time of filming, even though the novel has the little girl much, much smaller. Natalie Portman auditioned for the role, but Kirsten beat her for it. Others that auditioned were Christina Ricci, Dominique Swain, Julia Stiles, who I like a lot, actually.
Yes.
Aaron Moore and Evan Rachel Wood all auditioned.
Ooh, I could really see Evan Rachel Wood, and that would be like a callback to Westworld. But
But what's funny is that Kirsten Dunst was relatively unknown. I guess most of them were relatively unknown at the time, and she still got the part. One other that auditioned, someone named Kat Graham, who is on the Vampire Diaries. I don't know who she is. Do you? No. Okay.
I don't watch the Vampire Diaries. That's bad vampirism as opposed to good vampirism.
Yeah. And then I don't have much as far as Armand. Just mainly what I said earlier is that he's supposed to be Russian, and yet they played him as Spanish with dark hair. But one interesting note is that he auditioned to play the role of Dracula in the Coppola version. There you go. That would have been interesting.
That would have been interesting, yes.
But I think that's all I have for casting. If you don't have anything.
Nope, I'm good.
We can move on. One of the things I did want to talk about briefly is scenes. What scenes stick out to you? Because there are several that I can think of that are just
scenes. Definitely the first transformation is great. The whole when Louis is turned, the embrace, as they call it in vampire lore, is great.
What do you think about, in the book, she talks so much about how more attuned your vision is as a vampire. What do you think of that little weird trick they did with the statue in the graveyard?
I loved it. I liked it. As a matter of fact, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. A little bit more of the almost. It's ironic because we just did Cat People a few weeks ago, and the scene where she first changes and she's seeing things with cat eyes and hearing and sensing, and they did some of that effects to it. I would have liked just a little bit of that to show how more attuned they are. But I really like that scene. I like the scene where they first meet Claudia with her, holding the hand of her dead mom, and Louis, and Lestat dances with the body and all of that. That's a really hilarious. That's a very morbidly great sequence.
Yeah.
Of course, I like the vengeance on all of Armand's.
bum, bum. That music is just fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome in the way he did, and I love because he's talking to the interviewer and he goes, "Perhaps that's why I took the vengeance I did." And then it cuts in the music and everything. I love that.
Dun, 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 dun,
I
dun.
like the explanation. I guess it's not necessarily a scene, but a couple of scenes there where Louis is saying, "I knew the question would eventually come," and Claudia finally asks, "How was she born?" And they have to tell her, and Louis takes her to the house, and then she runs away, and all of that. And then she comes back to him saying, "I can't stay mad at you." You know, that whole sequence is very well done and very good. I like the scene at the vampire opera because there's boobies. No.
Okay.
No,
there is nudity,
no.
full nudity.
There is full nudity in that, but I liked Lestat's return. I think as a horror movie, that was really good.
On the piano?
Yes.
In the
First
shears?
at the doorway, and then the way the sheer curtain is over him at the piano, and the way
he looks cadaver-esque.
And then saying that you've been a very bad girl. You go, yeah, that was great. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go. Your turn.
I have three that stick out to me.
Okay.
One is very subtle. Anne Rice always talks about in the books how these vampires walk among us and can be mistaken for human. And I was like plunged into that within the very first frame of this film. I love the opening with the Golden Gate Bridge at night and that music going slowly across the water into San Francisco. As soon as I watched it last night, I got chills. I was like, this is a great opening to this.
Yeah, and that whole credit sequence just walking on the street. Yes. And every now and then people would look right at the camera and then walk away. And so you're definitely getting a POV. You just don't know of what yet.
And then when it cuts to them in the room, Louis facing away. We're waiting for him to turn. And I'm just like, wow, that's just really good.
Yeah, great introduction to both of those characters. That was really good. Yes, I
love all of the stuff with Lestat trying to teach Louis how to be a vampire. And I mean, some of it is comedy, but then it's capped off with that amazing scene with the prostitutes where they're in the room and he bites the girl's boob. And then when he moves away, you see all the blood coming down the front of her dress. And he's like trying to convince Louis that he's a killer, and Louis is not having it. And then he just starts toying with that woman like a cat when he kicks the table off and it's a coffin and he puts her in her coffin and she goes, "Am I dead?" He goes, "I don't know. You must be. It's a coffin."
It's a coffin, isn't it?
Yeah. And then he slams her in the coffin and sits on it. And he's just taunting her and trying to teach Louis at the same time. And Louis is just not having it. And then
good sequence.
But the thing is you can tell, and I give Cruise credit with this because Lestat is played as the enemy in the first novel, and then he becomes a hero in later novels. But you can see Lestat's humanity at the end of that scene where he cannot do it anymore, and he just kills the girl. He's like, "Louis is not going to do it. I got to do this," and he just kills her really quickly and throws her down. Yeah,
but interesting. I don't see that as humanity. I see that as just Lestat being Lestat. I like him as an anti-villain kind of thing anyway. Anti-hero, because he's basically just telling Louis, this is what you are now. I gave you a choice. I said, do you want it or not? You said yes, this is what you get. You know, even though that's his big cop-out. I do like the way Cruise plays that, even to the end, although I do strongly dislike the ending of this movie. But, ending it with the, I'm going to give you a choice that I never had. That seems to be his modus operandi.
Well, and I don't mind that so much as the fact that how did he end up in San Francisco in the guy's car? In the book, Daniel goes looking for him. So it would have made more sense if Daniel just went down to Louisiana and then that happened. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
But
Yeah.
instead, they were like going for the quick horror movie ending, jump scare type
That was
thing.
terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Okay, and I may have been projecting a bit, like I said, with the book, because you did see a little bit of Lestat, I thought, feeling sorry for that woman in the end and killing her fast. But my other favorite scene is the Claudia montage. I think it is fabulous. It is hilarious. It is dark. It is the one where it just shows like her methods of killing, where like it starts, I think, with Lestat observing her kill the old woman on the bench.
Yeah.
But then it has her like strutting into the doll shop and the woman telling her that doll's too expensive for her, that she walks out with the doll. And then her with the piano and she's playing and that guy smacks her wrist and she just looks at him.
And then it cuts back and all of a sudden his head falls down on the
he's like
piano.
dead.
And Lestat just says, push him off, you know, and they start playing the piano
and they start
together.
playing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Love that montage. I think it's fabulous. The music fits, everything about it. The humor.
And doesn't it either begins or it ends with her killing the dressmaker and
yes,
Lestat coming in going, who are we going to get to finish your dress now?
Yes.
I've told you, never in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are three scenes that stick out to me. I could name more, of course. Any of the stuff when like Claudia and Madeline are imprisoned and they're going to die.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That could have gone on just a hair more for me, just for the pain of it and the pathos of it. But when he, kudos to Pitt when he opens that door and sees them and the way they're done with that beautiful ash sculpture kind of thing. And now, of course, we've got a key because that's totally Avengers when he touches her and she like turns into ash and floats.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right.
Yeah,
I've got another kudos is to Stephen Ray, who is fantastic as Santiago, and I just want to kill him.
Oh,
and
God,
he's
him.
Yes, and he's that way in the book too.
He is probably the most faithful, other than certain scenes with Louis, to the book. I think.
Yeah, I would say that too.
Even down to when you first meet him and he does the little mime with him, mirror stuff, and then walks on the ceiling. And all that.
Even though he's upside down and his hair doesn't move, that always bothered me.
Hat stays on.
Yeah. It's vampire magic.
It's vampire magic.
So anyway, those were scenes that stick out. And like you said, that scene where he gets vengeance, that music and the fire, him sloshing all the coffins with the gas. I mean, that's just amazing.
And then waiting for them with the scythe, the actual scythe that they were using on the set, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
That was... and it is, this movie, I think for vampire lovers, this movie is extraordinarily iconic and should be. It's just that it's kind of like The Shining. You have to say, here's the book, here's the movie, both good,
yes,
but they're not the same thing.
It's a good comparison because they both, King had issues with casting in The Shining too, obviously.
Of course.
But they're their own separate entities, and I love them both. So
yes, I would agree with that.
And it's hard for me to say that because how much I hate Tom Cruise. So I mean, I don't like Tom Cruise. Anyway,
I had to do that for Matrix, dude. I had to do it for Matrix.
Yeah, I mean, anything Keanu's in. I mean, if I had to name, there's so many. I mean, Travolta, I can handle him in Pulp Fiction, but I don't really like him in much else.
Yep.
I'm not a big Saturday Night Fever Grease fan.
Nope. No, sir. No, sir. Don't care for it.
Nope. I can move on to awards if you like before we go.
Yeah, let's do some awards and then we'll just do general notes if you want.
Okay. It was nominated for an Oscar for Best Art Direction, who you mentioned earlier. That person.
Ferretti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Best Music.
Dante Ferretti. Yeah. And music. It deserved music. Music was excellent.
Yeah. And then the Golden Globes nominated Dunst for a supporting actress, which I thought was fantastic. And they also nominated the score by Goldenthal. However, that it didn't win anything till it went over to the other continent and won a BAFTA for cinematography and production design. So it won the equivalent of an Oscar in England. And then it was also a nominee for costumes and hair, which you mentioned that costume lady too. So England gave this movie more than America did.
Well, I think it has a European feel to it, which I think Neil Jordan has a European feel to the way he does stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because Ferretti was so good that he ended up doing like almost everything after this that Martin Scorsese's done. So like he ended up doing Gangs of New York, Aviator, Shutter Island, all of these things that have really cool production design. Dante Ferretti did. So
yeah, I saw Shutter Island. I don't think I've seen the other two.
So it got the awards I think it deserved over there.
It did, and it got. I mentioned this a lot, even though I'm not really that familiar with it. But the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, it was a winner for Best Horror Film, Best Young Actor, and Best Costumes. So it did win that, and I'm assuming that's an American organization. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But that a lot of what we do, that organization is mentioned just because of the two genres we deal with.
Okay.
So those are the awards I have. Other than that, I've got a few little spots maybe of trivia left, as well as some keys.
Okay, we'll throw those in.
Okay.
I've got a music note in the fact that I like, in the novel, I always remember the novel. The embrace in the novel is so well described by her of what it's like to actually hear his own heartbeat starting to fade and Lestat's get more powerful and the way it changes and his physical changes as it happens and then the way the body dies and then suddenly reanimates as a vampire. I think they filmed that very well, but I also think the music helped because you could hear those bass notes of a heartbeat and the way they changed and moved and then stopped. And then they did that real subtle effect of the teeth appearing, the blood disappearing, and his eyes going to the contacts. They were all like superimposed and very subtle, but very well done.
And in the book, it took several hours. In the movie, of course, they cut that. But yeah.
Well, yeah, because you get there and do it.
Yeah. They have to go empty their vessels.
Oh, look, a bunch of torches. That seems so very Frankenstein and horror. So that's kind of like a key for me, too.
I mean, Hammer in general, it reminds you of like a really lush Hammer film.
I've got G10. There's some sexual overtones to this whole movie. I've got my little quip. So they do away with a lot of vampire conventions. I don't have any problem with that. Lestat enters his house without being invited. They don't ever mention garlic, period. He says he loves crucifixes. Steak, he goes, big damn deal. So, I've always loved that because of, I can't remember the source. It was either another movie or a novel or something, but somebody said, so wait, if I stake you in the heart, will you die? And the vampire looks at him and goes, if I stake you in the heart, will you die? Yes, of course, I will die. What? But he talks about the dark gift, and help me because I only read two. I read Interview and Vampire Lestat. I didn't read any of rest of Anne Rice.
Okay.
But does she
I would recommend Queen of the Dam and Tell the Body.
Does she explore the dark gifts or whatever? Because it seems like nobody else has it other than Louis says they can read your mind, although Louis can't. Lestat says they can read your mind, although Louis can't read anybody's mind.
Well, and that's wrong. In the books, you can read everyone's mind except the one that made you. So Louis should have been, he wouldn't have been able to read Lestat's mind, but he would have been able to read those people's mind in that movie. I don't know why they didn't let him, or maybe he was attuning his skills or something. I don't know.
But they have other dark arts?
No, the dark gift is just a metaphor for vampirism itself.
Oh, okay.
Now, the stronger they get, and Lestat is not as old as he pretends to be. He's made by a vampire named Magnus that was a guy in France that basically made Lestat and then jumped into a fire and killed himself. You probably read that maybe in the second book. So he never had anything to go on either. He was kind of like Louis. He was like, I don't know where I came from. But then in Queen of the Damned, he starts going back to find the original and drinks from them. And the older you are, the stronger you are. And the more your skin is like marble and impenetrable. And really death is only from the sun or fire or some kind of dismemberment. However, Lestat gets so much noble old blood in him that he's practically indestructible. As a matter of fact, he tries to kill himself. He can fly because they do have him fly in this movie, but he really didn't learn that until he had more powers later on in the series. But he does try to kill himself at one time by flying into the sun, and he gets as far as he can, and then he just falls and lands in the desert, and he wakes up with a really good tan. Because he couldn't even kill himself. So, but like they kill Santiago in this movie by dismemberment and I'm assuming fire. They tried to kill Lestat by cutting his throat, but he survived in the swamp, and then he gets set on fire later, but I'm assuming he put himself out and just slowly healed,
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's some inconsistencies to it, because I have the quote he actually said was, the dark gift is different for each of us.
He does say that.
But then they do stuff like flying seems to be ambiguous. Some people do it, some people don't. Some can, some can't, whatever.
Well, and in the book, they don't do it at all. Not
right.
I don't think he flies until like the third book.
If Lestat can read minds, which he says he can do and obviously purports to do, why couldn't he read Claudia's that she was murdering him or getting ready to kill him? I thought that was weird.
I think it's the connection between who turns you. You can't read each other's thoughts.
So between your sire and your sheep, you can't do it. Okay, that makes...
And that's how Santiago picked up on Louis' thoughts. He heard Louis thinking about Lestat. And that's how...
I have Jesus Christ, thank God they don't sparkle.
Or play baseball.
Yeah, or play baseball. And then I have, because I couldn't remember, is that how the book ends? The book doesn't end with him in San Francisco, right? The book
not with Lestat in San Francisco, no. It does end with Louis and the boy in San Francisco.
Right.
Louis just says, God, haven't you learned anything from what I've told you? He scares the boy and leaves. And when the boy wakes up, the boy is listening to the tape and he hears that Louis had gone to visit Lestat in New Orleans in the 1920s. And so he says he goes to New Orleans. Right. And Daniel becomes a vampire eventually in the books too. Yeah. Interesting.
Cool. What about you? Said has more trivia?
I had something. Well, I had a few lines I liked. I mentioned I'm quite fond of crucifixes. I love when Claudia just says, I want some more. It's like right as soon as she turns, she's already a killer. You can tell. And then I love Lestat's line, merciful death, how you love your precious guilt. That's a great line. The other trivia I had was we discussed how Anne Rice was really upset with the casting of Tom Cruise, but once she saw the movie, she completely flipped and loved it, and she took out a 2-page ad in both Variety and the New York Times endorsing it as a masterpiece.
Wow.
Yeah, and she called Tom Cruise and apologized too.
I thought the way they killed Claudia, and I forgot her name, but she was going to be my mom, was so poetic and so good and so neat the way they did it. Really liked that.
You talking about just putting them in the well?
Yeah, and the way they turned into almost like Pompeii sort of sculptures. And just very, very nice. Because I had, even from the novel, I had a really weird attraction to Claudia. even though she was 5 at that time. But I like the fact that she was, which is one of my biggest keys, which is near dark. It's that same kind of a kid that's really an adult in mind, but they're physically an immortal child kind of thing. And Near Dark has that with the little kid.
Right. That's from like the Civil War. He's like the
he's
oldest
in
of
the
all
Civil
of them.
War.
Yeah. I like that too. I can't remember exactly if it's done that way in the book, but I see why they did it in the movie, because they wanted Louis to see that it was actually her, because you can still see her face before it crumbles.
Yeah.
And I can't remember in the book if it's just Ash or not. Also in the book, Lestat turns up in Paris. I think he's the one that has Claudia killed. He could have been behind it, in like in partnership with Armand.
Yeah.
And then Louis goes off with Armand for a couple of years and it doesn't work out, so he leaves him. So it's kind of strange. I don't have any problems with the way they chopped it down to make it into a movie. I think it flows really well. I think everything about it works.
Yeah, I like the
structure.
standoff. I liked Louis telling Armand, "I know you were behind it, and no, you're not going to get me," and walking away from him. I liked that. I thought that was nice, and essentially doing the exact same thing to Lestat.
Right, because they have this notion that they have to be connected to someone else of a more modern time to exist and survive immortality. I think they later realized that's not really necessarily true, but in the beginning that's kind of ingrained into their brain. A lot of them, the mythos and lore that you're talking about that's dismissed, Louis and Claudia in the book go looking for that stuff. Like they find like feral vampires out in the country of Transylvania or wherever. Even though he refers to Dracula being the demented, something of a demented Irishman. The delusions of a demented
delusions. Delusions of a demented Irishman.
Yeah, that's a good line too. In the book, it was the death of Louis's brother. He did not have a wife and child. That was why he was grieving. And this is just something I found fascinating. I just thought it was kind of cool. Is while they were filming in London, Brad Pitt stayed in a house which used to be owned by Peter Cushing.
There's a key for you. That's
Van Helsing. So speaking of keys, I guess that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
I already opened with Gone with the Wind, so I'm not going to say that again.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Near Dark. What else do you have?
Well, Lost Boys, of course. That whole youth, party forever kind of thing. Although, if you had asked me before I did my research, I would have said Lost Boys came after this movie, but it came before this movie, which I thought was
it did. This movie's the 90s.
A key that I have, I don't know if you would have, but I would have, is Masquerade the Vampires, which is the game, the White Wolf game series that started. It's a role-playing game, and it has so much Anne Rice woven into it and through it and everything else. And one of those you actually reminded me of when you mentioned it, because I wasn't aware, because of Queen of the Damned I haven't read. But if you kill a vampire who's of another age than you actually gain more power. You gain what they had, any skills they have, any powers they have, whatever. If you end up killing a sire, essentially, which was cool. But that whole game series is so influenced by, they even came up with a whole sect that are mummies after she wrote that section of books. So, they've got a whole sect of these creatures that you can role play, kind of thing, which is great.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it, really.
I think fun.
Yeah, the biggest key I think that you could probably toss out there would be Dracula. If you wanted to, it's obviously a play on. Not a play, but is obviously involving vampires, which is Dracula's the granddaddy of them all. But they also refer to surviving on rats, which is what Dracula did when he came over on the ship too.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea was lifted directly from the book as well. So I also read that I did not know this. I knew it had been adapted once, but apparently it's been adapted 3 times as a comic book or graphic novel.
We can't leave without mentioning Twilight, unfortunately. But
well, I mean, there's
Twilight
just a million vampire movies we could mention.
But that whole novel series is severely influenced by Anne Rice. The whole angsty vampire who, who doesn't want to kill, who's just, because their whole clan doesn't kill. They're essentially vegan vampires, kind of thing.
It's terrible.
You've got to read those books, and they're just so good. You just love them.
Have you read them?
I read every one of them.
You are lying to me.
I know, I swear to God, I did.
Why?
Just to see what the whole teen, young adult angst is over that book. I
watched the movie, the first movie, and I was like, I'm done.
Well, and Autumn, my daughter, loved those books and loved the movies. So we had to watch all of them because she was of that age and everything. And just, there's just so many mistakes made, it's just, I was going, okay, these aren't vampires. Call them something else. Call them ghoulies or something, but they're not freaking vampires.
Yeah.
They just elect not to show up in daylight because they sparkle. Their skin sparkles. And no, that's yeah.
I've never discussed this, but one of the problems I have with Buffy and one of the problems I have with True Blood is, why does it all of a sudden have to be a monster universe? It's like it starts with vampires, but then all of a sudden you've got shifters and werewolves and everything else under the moon. I'm like,
well, the whole point with Buffy was each of those were, demons for some reason. He was saying, I'm going to tell this angsty high school, early college kind of story, and all of the problems you have with that, only demons are going to represent it. Same way like in Star Trek, we're going to cloak, the Vietnam War with this other planet and in sci-fi and everything else. I mean, that's what Joss Whedon was doing with Buffy. And he actually, after the second season, kind of got out of that Demon of the Week kind of stuff and got much more into telling more arc-type stories that were more, were stronger.
And then True Blood, to me, I mean, I liked it up till like the 3rd season with the Vampire King or whatever his name was. I thought he was great.
Yeah.
But then it started going into like Monster of the Week and
Which
everybody's going to be a vampire. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait. But I guess they just run out of material and don't want to end it.
True.
Yeah.
True. Look at Walking Dead, Same thing.
Yeah, but no, they got the material though. That thing went on and on.
No, of course I haven't watched it in 2 years, so I can't. But yeah, I mean that's basically all. Other than just there's a ton of vampire books. There's a ton of vampire movies that could be attributed to it.
Yeah, I mean we could throw those under one lump key, I think.
Yeah, and I think the horror elements of it, like you said, the very Hammer-esque kind of elements
Gothic
of it, the gothicness of it, torches, fire to kill them, that sort of thing. So,
I have a couple others. One would be Concrete Blonde's album Bloodletting.
Oh my God, love it.
Wearing a T-shirt right now from a Concrete Blonde concert. That whole album is inspired by Interview with a Vampire and the Vampire Lestat.
And it's awesome.
It's got great songs on it, including Bloodletting, The Sky is a Poisonous Garden Tonight. Just anyway, it's just she says Poisonous Garden. Anne Rice referred to it as Savage Garden. But anyway, if you've never listened to Concrete Blonde, I highly recommend that album.
Yes.
And then lastly, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that back in May, just, a few short months back, AMC acquired not only the Vampire Chronicles, but the Mayfair Witches, and are planning on developing them into series, I'm assuming. and I am very interested in this.
I'm sure Nicotero will do a great job.
I don't care if it's him or not. I just hope they cast it right.
Yeah, well, okay. What would you do? I mean, if they were casting it now, who would you cast? Is there anybody that jumps out that you think would make a good Louis right now?
People keep shouting Jared Leto. I don't know about him. I mean, he's skinny and he looks like a vampire.
I could see that. I think he would have the guilt. I mean, he could be able to play the guilt for Louis.
Yeah,
that might work.
I used to cast David Farmer, and I used to play this game with the books a long time ago. But of course, the people that we cast back then would be too old now. Like I always said, Bowie would be perfect for Marius. I've always thought he would be perfect, and Cher would make a great vampire, but she's too old now.
Right. Well, I remember people used to say Sting should have played Lestat.
I could see that
even back then, and I was going, yeah, I could see that back then.
But he wasn't a great actor.
No,
he was never really known for acting.
No,
but he's got the look. And speaking of which, there's another key. He did a song on his first solo album called "Moon Over Bourbon Street," and it's because of this book as well.
Yep, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yep.
But yeah, so all of you out there, look to the skies. No. Look to AMC for future developments in Anne Rice, and apparently both she and her son Christopher are consulting producers or associate producers or something. So they're going to have their foot in on this. They're not going to let them screw it up. Hopefully.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think that's it for our extended vampire edition. This might be a kind of a vampire season. We've got a few others coming up.
We do, yeah. And as always, thank you guys for listening to us. Make sure you like us, review us, send us some emails, tweet us, whatever. Let us know what you
tell your friends about us.
Yes, we would love to have more join the cult.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that reminds me. My nephew, Jason's daughter, Rainey, is on vacation at the beach, and her mother was telling me, "Hey, Tim, we're thinking about you. We watched The Evil Dead last night." Mind you, she's 14, and then she was. Yeah, and then she was like, "Now we're watching The Thing and Alien," and then she, oh God, I can't remember what the other one was that she wrote. Oh, she said, "And now we're going to watch Train to Busan," and I'm like, "Man, this is great! I need to get with her. She needs to be listening to our podcast because we've covered a lot of those movies." So
obviously, yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, anyway,
cool.
The youthful horror that is out there.
As always, Tim, it is awesome doing this with you. Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, thank you. And we will see you next time.
Next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.